Hi, I'm Curtis Woloschuk, Director of Programming at the Vancouver International Film Festival. The work of the Vancouver International Film Festival takes place on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people. VIFF is an organization that's largely run by settlers and immigrants, and as such, we recognize that we have a responsibility to building meaningful relationships with Indigenous curators, communities, and organizations. And it's work we take very seriously and look forward to continuing committing ourselves to in the years to come. I'm very excited today to be joined by Zarrar Kahn, the writer-director of In Flames. In Flames deals with two women, a mother and daughter, who are dealing with not only the death of the family patriarch, but also figures in their past and malevolent forces. It takes place in the streets and apartments of Karachi, Pakistan. And this is a unique film in that it premiered at the Directors Fortnight at Cannes, the first Telefilm Talent Watch film to do so. And most recently, or maybe not most recently, but quite recently, also picked up a $100,000 award at the Red Sea International Film Festival. Its track record, is impressive, and I think the film and execution is all the more impressive. And consequently, very excited to have writer-director Zarrar Kahn with us today. Welcome, Zarrar.
Hi, Curtis. Thanks so much for having me. It's really good to be here with you.
It is. I'm not sure how you kind of reflect upon 2023 as a year for yourself. A filmmaker probably undertakes their first feature film with certain hopes, certain expectations, and maybe certain tempering of expectations as well. And as you sit here also with a Canadian Screen Award for Best First Feature Film to your credit as well. Or sorry, nomination in that category to your credit as
Fingers
well.
crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, TBA, how this plays out. How do you kind of reflect back on the past 12 months for yourself and the journey for the film?
I mean, for me, I'm always someone who's hoping to shoot for the moon and see where we land. And with this film, I mean, I always knew going in that your first feature, it needs to say everything you hope to say and be as ambitious as you can and just swing for the fences. And a little bit of that came from doing a 6-month internship at Entertainment One at a company called Film Seville, which doesn't really exist anymore. They used to do kind of E1's like art house titles, and that was 6 months, but it was a very deep learning happened, and it happened right after I graduated from college. And talking to sales agents, man, they're brutal about films. They're brutal about when you hear them talk when filmmakers aren't there. And I'm like, this is how they're talking about this filmmaker's baby, and saying that, oh, this guy wasn't brave enough, he didn't swing for the fences, and I didn't want anyone to say that about me. So I tried to do everything I could with this film, and I'm so grateful for the reactions. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't dreaming for Cannes. That was definitely, as a filmmaker, the place I had always dreamed of having a film play at. I submitted all my shorts there, not one got in. And yeah, then it was where we were able to premiere this film and have such an incredible journey with it since, with stops at TIFF, Busan, such as Vancouver. I've gotten to see Canada from coast to coast, and it's been 2023 for me was like the year that everything that I'd been hoping for in my career happened. So it's very strange to reflect on that as I say it now.
Yeah, and, doesn't set the bar at all high for the next one. Yeah. What do you do for an encore, right? Well, it's I think for myself, one of the fascinating things about the film is that you were born in Karachi and were able to return there to make your first feature film, and wondering maybe about like some early impressions or maybe lasting impressions of the city on yourself, and like what were maybe some like sensorial memories or cultural memories you found yourself drawing upon while writing the film. And then when being back in that space to actually shoot it, I'm wondering how much it how it compared to your memories of the space as well.
I mean, my relationship with Karachi is so like defining in my journey as a filmmaker not only was I born there, it's where, my family immigrated to Canada when I was 9, and then I moved back when I was 16. So I also did high school there, and then I came back to Canada for university, and then after university, I worked in Toronto for a year, and then I moved back to Pakistan to start my career as a filmmaker. And my career was nurtured by independent artists and so many incredible people who came forward to help me become an independent filmmaker in a space where film, was really only starting to be seen as an art form again uh, in those stages. So I moved back in 2015, and then I spent 10 years developing short films in Pakistan, like developing a crew, creating vendor relationships, learning about locations, building an independent film infrastructure, and being inspired by the artists and the city all around me as I learned about it in a different way. Because, when you're a high schooler, you're living in your own bubble. You're not really engaging with the city. And then I feel like it's as an adult, you're able to dive into it in a very different way. And I also met people from all different walks of life. And Karachi is a place that is, to me, deeply beautiful, but that beauty is something you really have to squint to see. You're kind of like looking past the dust and the haze and the barbed wire, and you can see the blue of the Arabian Sea on the edge of the frame. And I knew I wanted to show the geography and the landscape of what it feels like to be in this city. It's a city of 30 million people. It's where everyone in Pakistan comes to make their jobs and their dreams come true. It's the big economic point. Um, and I wanted to capture how it can feel overwhelming in a both visually as well as like from a sensory way. And so I think the consequence of that is people have described In Flames as suffocating. And, I kind of nod along to that because I'm like, it was designed to be so. The city can feel suffocating and it can, at the same time, though, it has an escape that's like no other, the beach, which is another huge part of the movie.
Well, it's interesting you saying that people come to Karachi to kind of realize their dreams, and yet it is kind of the ground zero for this waking nightmare that Mariam and Faraya experience throughout the film. And wondering for yourself, this is a film that is very much bleeds kind of social realism into supernatural horror as well, and wondering as you're developing the narrative, how you wanted to balance out those kind of like real world horrors with the supernatural elements for the characters we find within it.
Well, for me, I mean, the society is a place that is deeply religious and simultaneously very superstitious. And those superstitions are kind of baked into the way that people navigate their lives. So for Mariam and for Fariha, these two women who were watching as they're facing a society that's not necessarily there to support them, they're also framing things through that superstitious lens. So the supernatural, it was always going to be a part of this film because it's how these two characters frame the world around them. The horrors both feel real, but they also feel like something that is so horrifying that it can no longer be real. Um, and I wanted to lean into that. And for me as a filmmaker, I've also, my schooling's been kind of non-traditional. I never went to film school. I did a theater undergrad, and my film school is film labs across the world, like from Locarno to Busan to Toronto, where I was able to watch films and not only learn the kind of films that I enjoy, but also the filmmaking conventions and the ways of telling stories that I gravitated towards. And what I really love about genre, as soon as I started doing a deep dive into starting with like D'Argento's work and then making my way to contemporary genre filmmakers, is how visceral that can feel. So I wanted to use genre to really show how deep it is for these women to face these consequences. And I wanted the audience to really viscerally feel like they're in that space. And that's what made me gravitate towards genre and towards the supernatural.
Wondering if you can speak a little bit to your casting as well, because your two actresses do not have long resumes in terms of like front, being in front of the camera work, and maybe your conversation, what drew you to them as individuals, how you felt they could bring these characters to life, and maybe something different they brought to the characters once they're actually in front of camera that you never saw in those in the potential for those characters before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. The performances by both Bakhtaour Mazur, who plays the role of Fariha, and Ramisha Nawal, who plays Mariam, uh, I think they are this like the shining light of this film, and it's that relationship of mother and daughter that really has such a deep impact. And stays with the viewer, I hope. With Bakhtaour Mazur, I met her when we were making the short film Dia in 2018, which ended up being the inspiration for what would be In Flames. Bakhtaour, through that film, so I met her because we were looking for someone to play the role, and she was recommended by Zain Ahmed, who was the director of the National Academy of Performing Arts. And Bakhtaour is someone who hadn't acted in front that was her first film ever, that short film. And she's someone who took a break from acting, from performance, to raise the kids to have a family. And after she did that film, we ended up kind of like developing this relationship where she did two other short films of mine. And she was just really generous with her experiences with me. And how I like to work with performers is when I'm developing a script, I really see them as collaborators. So she was getting early drafts of the script and giving me feedback on what her own experiences are of being a mother, of being a wife, of being a woman in Pakistan. And that really informed the relationship between mother and daughter, as well as the character of Fariha. And Bakhtaour really continued to surprise on set. This is a pretty physical role, and I knew she could do the quieter moments, but I was really worried when I'm like, we're going to put a torch in your hand and have you race into a beach hut, like no spoilers. And Bakhtaour was game. So that was the surprise for me. It's to see, these larger moments, which a lot of the film is restraint, but it balances restraint as well as kind of like a larger exhibitionism. Um, and it was those bigger moments that I was really pleasantly surprised to see her sink her teeth into. With Ramisha, she transforms into this entire other beast when the camera's on her. And this film is her first time on camera, and like she's so incredible, so nuanced, so restrained. There's so much power, there's so much agency, and she had to do so much for this film to work because so much of it depends on her performance. And I think for her, because she is an oldest daughter, she is a young woman in Karachi navigating that society. She had this well to draw upon. Um, and I'm so excited to see where her career goes. With Ramisha, it was really just always about pulling her back and making the moments smaller, because just her eyes are so expressive. And she has one of those faces that are meant for cameras. So yeah, it's been a real joy seeing people resonate with these performances of these two incredible powerhouse females, and also for all three of us to have our debuts together. My casting director, Mohammed Ali Hashmi, arranged a Zoom audition with Ramisha, and it was a blind audition. And I remember hopping on that camera with her and the grainy camera quality and just being completely entranced by her performance. And like watching her and seeing how much she's able to convey on a shitty Zoom camera, knowing that, this is our lead. This is Mariam. And immediately after that, trying to find other performers to build around her to support her. Yeah, it's been a joy working with her.
I'm really curious for yourself then as a director, because you talked about the description of suffocating for the film, and also those visceral elements of horror, and the film's subjects itself, dealing with the many forms of patriarchy and oppression. How did you go about kind of creating a safe space on set for your leads to be able to go where they needed to go with these characters, but also know that they were always supported, and had maybe the time to recover from scenes as well to be able to bring themselves to the next stage of filming?
Um, a lot of it came from knowing that we were doing a film that is speaking about the oppression of an entire gender and wanting to ensure, because when we talk about diversity in cinema, the focus so far, from my experience, has been in front of the camera. And, what happens when that camera turns around is it tends to be a room full of guys. And this is across the world, working on sets in Canada, in Korea, in Pakistan. So we were intentionally trying to build out a space where we had heads of department who identified as females, and that included our incredible team, Anima Abbas, my producer, Carol Nerona, my line producer, and our cinematographer, Egil Nurbulatova. Because for me as the director, the real eyes that we're looking through are those of the cinematographer. And I knew I needed a cinematographer who has seen how these characters would be seeing, how they would be navigating that society. And Egil's from Kazakhstan, which is a very different place, but there also are cultural touch points that are quite similar. And by creating a space where it was gender diverse behind the camera, it allowed our performers to feel safe. We had a lot of closed sets and closed off to even me. Like I wasn't in the space when we were doing some of the more risque work. I would be like outside with my tiny monitor that no one could see but me, and it would really only be my performers and the cinematographer in the room. And that allowed them to feel safe and allowed them to push further than they might otherwise feel comfortable, because this film does go there. And especially in Pakistani cinema, it really goes there. So it was, working with the intent that we wanted to make sure that what was happening in front of the camera for how people were living their lives was also experienced behind. And that being said, a lot of the guys who play some of the more challenging characters are really lovely dudes, like across the board. So like when, really horrifying visceral things were happening, like I would have to pull back Ramisha Bakhtar and be like, please stop laughing. Like we need to get in character for this scene. So I'm a big believer that actors, there's that early school of thought where we have to shock the actor, we have to put them in the trauma. And I really don't believe that. I think good actors act, and that's why they're on set. So you want to create circumstances that allow them to do that. And that's what I hope that we did.
I find that really fascinating. Yourself actually removing yourself from the space itself and allowing the three of them to dictate that room, and or the players and cinematographer to dictate the energy of the space. And you mentioned your kind of collaboration with Bakhtar around the script and her own experiences as a mother. Um, Maybe just as the story was gestating for yourself and taking shape in some earlier drafts before you could rely upon cast for feedback, telling what is a story about patriarchy, is female centered for yourself. What were some checkpoints to know that you were getting this right, if you will, and that you were honoring the stories, honoring the experiences, and I guess respecting the responsibility that's sat with you to tell this story, to be maybe the guide for the story, if not the sole storyteller of it.
The guide would be kind of the way that I approached it, where it is really, I've had the privilege of working with many diverse communities in Pakistan. And those communities are always people who are always fighting to get their voice heard. And I feel as a filmmaker, as a director, what I can do is amplify through the lens of cinema. You know, especially right now with podcasts, with social media, people are doing the work to get their voice out there. But what cinema can do is it can amplify that in a completely different context and an emotional context. So it was knowing that the communities that I'm working with, in this lens, it's an entire gender, is deeply doing so much to change what it means to be a woman in Pakistan. We're in the third iteration of the Women's March right now in Pakistan. There's been great strides made, but it's changing a culture and changing a mindset. And I knew going into writing the script that I wanted to write a script that can, you know, act as inspiration for those incredibly brave women who are um, already doing everything they can to make their home a safer and more equitable space. It makes me think of Paul McCartney, writing Blackbird for Black female activists in the States. I think that's what art can do. It can inspire, it can offer hope, it can offer solace. And I believe In Flames acts as a film that amplifies the incredible resistance and resilience of a community.
Well, we talked off the top a little bit about, your opportunity to see Canada from coast to coast. And, I guess from this vantage point, we have talked about it being a telefilm production, Canadian, Pakistan co-production, but, it is one of the few Pakistan films that have played in that section of Cannes as well. So you're a representative of the national cinema there. I'm wondering, have you had the opportunity to share the film with audiences, or have that kind of community screenings of the film there? What has your experience been in that space?
It's been good. Like I unfortunately wasn't able to attend our Pakistan theatrical tour. That being said, everyone in Pakistan let me know in many different ways their thoughts in the film. It was a divisive film. We knew that going into it, because the culture is actively changing, and it really resonated with a lot of young people. I had a lot of like Instagram DMs, a lot of support for the youth. And I think, with social media, a young person's experience of the world is becoming more global. They're following the same influencers in Karachi as they might be in Vancouver, So we had a lot of really positive feedback from young folks. From some of the old guard, it was definitely less positive, but I take that as a badge of honor. And I understand that, no change comes without resistance. One of my favorite, as you know, I was mostly in Canada for our screenings. I didn't get to travel too much of the world with the film, but yeah, we had some incredible screenings in Canada. In Toronto, we were at Scotiabank. We were on a weekday morning, and I was really worried about how many people would be able to fill that cinema because it's like 400 people. We were in a big room and we were packed, on like a Thursday morning. And it was one of the best houses I've been in. And it was also the first time that the film was being seen to the general public. Um, and then Vancouver was also an incredible place because the Q&As there, I was like, wow, is everyone in Vancouver a cinephile? Like, what's going on here? Really smart questions. So it's been really wonderful sharing the film, um, and kind of seeing how so many people can see themselves and their own stories through the lens of this mother-daughter genre-bending film.
Yeah, and I'm really fascinated given what a couple things you said there, the reaction of people once they saw it on screen. Maybe going back to the beginning of our conversation, talking about kind of the absence or the growing independent film scene in Pakistan. So when you were shooting this film there, was there an awareness of the project? Was there like an understanding of the story that was being captured? And were you perhaps meeting like active resistance while actually shooting the film?
I learned early on to shoot first and request permission later. So, as someone who's been making short films in Karachi for a decade, that was an early lesson that I learned. So, yeah, we were shooting a mayonnaise commercial, and it allowed us more freedom to shoot as we wanted to. I've always kept my crews quite nimble, and able to react to whatever the city throws at us. So there wasn't a ton of awareness when we were shooting.
Did that fuel any of the kind of like paranoia that's infused into the film? Just like that, having to operate in secret as a production as well?
I don't know. Because like I think that was really the culture that I knew, and that was where I'd been creating work. So this was kind of how me and my team had learned to navigate. And also one of the things that we benefited from was being like a genre bending film because when you mentioned that you're a film that's about ghosts, immediately someone who's not a cinephile is thinking that, oh, this is like The Nun or Ghostbusters, and that's what I love that genre cinema has done for so long. It's being able to say things that drama might not be able to do. And there's a history of that from Hollywood to across the world. So we definitely leaned into that. And I think that's why we were able to, release theatrically in Pakistan. Definitely part of the censor board was thinking that, oh, this is another ghost film.
Well, so glad to know that audiences there have seen it. I know that audiences in Canada, as we sit here at the beginning of April, will soon have the opportunity to see it on a wider basis as well, and discover what is a truly remarkable film. We're so glad you were able to be here to talk about it a bit more today, and best of luck as you move forward with this film and future projects.
Thank you, Curtis. Thank you so much for having me.